Alien girl left to die in the snow with her newborn twin daughters, but a human rescued them. The bitter wind howled across the frozen wasteland, carrying ice crystals that stung like needles against any exposed flesh. Drifting snow obscured the narrow mountain pass, making the already treacherous route nearly impassable. Yet through this white hell trudged a massive beast, a kodo, its 6 muscular legs crushing through snowdrifts, hot breath billowing in great clouds from its armored nostrils. Atop the creature sat Chris Wade, his broad shoulders hunched against the relentless cold. The transport harness creaked beneath him as he guided the beast along the precarious path. His cargo, metal containers and sealed barrels, shifted slightly with each lumbering step of the kodo. "Easy, Brutus," Chris murmured, his voice barely audible above the wind. The kodo snorted in response, its thick hide rippling as it shook off accumulated snow. Chris was no stranger to Glacius Prime's harsh climate. 3 years hauling cargo across this frozen rock had hardened him against its cruelties. The planet's native inhabitants, the Nalori, had adapted to the cold over millennia. But humans like Chris relied on technology and determination to survive. He adjusted his thermal visor, scanning the path ahead. The reinforced gray-blue armor he wore was lined with synthetic fur, offering protection against both the elements and the occasional predator. His thick white cloak billowed behind him, catching the wind like a sail. Something caught his eye, a splash of color against the endless white. Chris frowned, adjusting his course slightly. Probably just debris from a previous caravan, he thought. Still, better to check. As he drew closer, the shape resolved into something that made his heart skip. A figure half buried in snow lay crumpled beside the path. "Whoa, Brutus!" He pulled the beast to a halt and dismounted, his boots crunching in the snow as he approached cautiously. It was a woman. No, not human. A Nylori female. Her pale blue skin almost blended with the snow around her, but her flowing silver hair caught the dim sunlight. She wore only a thin, ivory-colored dress that offered virtually no protection against the killing cold. But what truly shocked Chris was the small bundle clutched protectively against her chest. As he knelt beside her, he saw not one but 2 tiny faces, newborn twins with the same delicate features and pointed ears as their mother. "Holy shit!" he breathed. "Are you out here alone? Who would leave you and your babies in weather like this?" The woman's eyes fluttered open, light blue, almost luminescent against her pale skin. Fear flickered across her face before being replaced by resignation. "Useless," she whispered, her voice weak. "Burden after birth. Left behind." Chris felt rage building inside him. The Nylori were known for their pragmatic, sometimes brutal social practices, but abandoning a mother and newborns in the killing cold? That crossed a line even by frontier standards. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his prized fur cloak, a gift from a grateful merchant he'd saved from bandits last season. "Here," he said, wrapping it gently around her and the infants. "I'm getting you out of here." With careful movements, he lifted her into his arms. She was surprisingly light, even with the 2 infants. Chris carried her to his karamat and secured her among his cargo, creating a sheltered space protected from the wind. "You're safe now," he said, tucking thermal blankets around her and the babies. "I'll get you to the nearest city warm and alive." As he climbed back onto Brutus and urged the kodo forward, Chris couldn't help but wonder what he'd just gotten himself into. Interfering in Nylori affairs could bring trouble, but leaving them to die wasn't an option. Not for him. The woman watched him with those luminous eyes, clutching her babies closer as the karamat began moving again. "Why?" she asked simply. Chris glanced back at her, his expression softening slightly. "Because that's what humans do. We help people who need it." He turned his attention back to the treacherous path, unaware that this chance encounter would change not just his life, but potentially the future of 2 species on this frozen world. The wind shifted suddenly, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of an approaching blizzard. Chris glanced at the darkening sky, his experienced eyes reading the weather signs with growing concern. "Damn it," he muttered, scanning the jagged terrain. "We need shelter now." The Nylori woman stirred in her makeshift nest among his cargo. Her color had improved slightly, the pale blue of her skin taking on a healthier sheen, but she was still dangerously cold. "What happens?" she asked, her voice stronger than before, but still carrying an ethereal quality that seemed characteristic of her species. "Blizzard coming," Chris replied, guiding Brutus toward a rocky outcropping. "Can't make it to the outpost before it hits." He'd traveled this route enough times to know there were caves in these mountains. The challenge was finding one before the storm engulfed them. As if understanding the urgency, Brutus increased his pace, his powerful legs driving through the deepening snow. There, Chris spotted a dark opening in the cliff face, partially obscured by ice formations. "Hold on." He maneuvered the Kodo carefully along the narrow approach. The wind was howling now, driving snow and ice horizontally across their path. With practiced efficiency, Chris guided Brutus and the Karamat into the cave entrance just as the full fury of the storm descended. The sudden silence was almost disorienting. Only the occasional whistle of wind at the cave mouth and Brutus's heavy breathing broke the stillness. "Lucky find," Chris said, dismounting and activating his portable heater. The device hummed to life, casting a warm orange glow throughout the cave. "This should hold us until the storm passes." He helped the Nylori woman down from the Karamat, noting how she clutched her babies protectively. In the warmer air of the cave, they had begun to make soft cooing sounds. "They're beautiful," Chris said, unpacking thermal blankets and laying them on the smooth cave floor. "What are their names?" The woman hesitated, her luminous eyes studying him with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. "They have no names yet," she finally said. "In my culture, twins are unusual. They would have been taken from me, raised separately. That is why I was abandoned." Chris frowned. "Because you had twins?" He stopped himself from passing judgment on a culture he didn't fully understand. "I'm Chris Wade, by the way." "Kyria," she replied, "of House Valen, or I was, before." She glanced down at her daughters. As Chris prepared a simple meal from his supplies, Kyria told him more. She had been a high-ranking member of Nylori society, a spiritual advisor to the ruling council. But twins were considered an omen of division, a threat to their rigid social order. When she gave birth, she was immediately stripped of her position and ceremonially abandoned, left to die with her impure offspring. "That's barbaric," Chris said, unable to contain his outrage. "It is our way," Kyria replied, though her tone suggested she didn't entirely disagree with him. "For thousands of years, we have maintained order through such practices." "While human ways are different," Chris said, handing her a steaming cup of broth, "we protect our own, especially children." Kyria accepted the cup, her slender fingers brushing against his. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through Chris. In the warm light of the heater, her features were striking. High cheekbones, delicately pointed ears, and those mesmerizing eyes that seemed to shift between shades of blue. "Your kindness is, unexpected," she said softly. "I have been taught that humans are impulsive, dangerous." Chris smiled. "We can be, but we're also loyal, protective, and stubborn as hell when it comes to doing what's right." As the night deepened and the storm raged outside, they talked more. Kyria was fascinated by human customs and beliefs, particularly the concept of family bonds. Chris found himself equally intrigued by her insights into Nylori culture. Beyond the rigid traditions, there was beauty and wisdom in their ancient ways. The babies had fallen asleep, nestled together in a makeshift crib fashioned from one of Chris's supply crates. Watching them, Kyria's expression softened with a mother's love. "They deserve better than exile," she whispered. "They'll have it," Chris promised impulsively. "I'll make sure of it." Their eyes met across the warm glow of the heater. Something unspoken passed between them, a connection that transcended their different species and backgrounds. Chris felt a tightening in his chest, an attraction he hadn't expected but couldn't deny. Kara seemed to sense it too. She moved closer, her movements graceful despite her recent ordeal. "Your heart beats faster," she observed, placing a delicate hand on his chest. "Nylori can sense such things." Chris swallowed hard. "Is that part of your spiritual advisor training?" A smile curved her lips, the first he'd seen from her. "No, that is simply being female." The tension between them was palpable, a magnetic pull that neither seemed willing to resist. Outside, the blizzard howled, But within their shelter, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of attraction and possibility that neither had anticipated when the day began. Dawn never truly came on Glacius Prime during winter, just a slight lightening of the perpetual gloom. The blizzard had subsided to a steady snowfall, but Chris knew they were trapped for at least another day. The cave entrance was half blocked by a massive drift, and venturing out now would be suicide. He stoked the portable heater and checked on Brutus, who seemed content enough munching on nutrient blocks from their supplies. When he returned to their makeshift camp, he found Kyria awake, nursing one of her daughters while the other slept. "The little ones are stronger today," Chris observed, keeping a respectful distance. Kyria nodded. "Thanks to your warmth and food. On Nylori, we have a saying, 'Life granted is life bound.' I owe you a debt I cannot repay." "You don't owe me anything," Chris replied, settling across from her. Any decent human would have done the same. Would they? Her luminous eyes studied him with intensity. "I have observed humans since your kind established trading posts here. Many are not like you." Chris shrugged. "We're a mixed bunch, I'll give you that. But protecting the vulnerable is pretty fundamental to who we are." A comfortable silence fell between them. Chris prepared a simple breakfast while Kyria tended to her daughters. He couldn't help noticing the graceful movements of her slender fingers, the gentle curve of her neck as she bent to kiss each child's forehead. "They need names," he said suddenly. Kyria looked up, surprised. "Names hold power in Nylori culture. To name them would acknowledge their right to exist." "Well, they exist, and they're going to keep existing if I have anything to say about it." Her expression softened. "What would you call them, Chris Wade?" The question caught him off guard. "Me? I'm not sure I'm qualified. You saved their lives. In the old traditions, that gives you naming rights." Chris considered this unexpected honor. "What about Arya and Luna? Simple human names, but they sound a bit like your language." "Arya and Luna," Kyria repeated, testing the sounds. "They are beautiful." She looked down at the twins. "Which is which?" Chris moved closer, studying the sleeping infants. Though identical at first glance, he noticed one had a slightly more pronounced point to her ears. "This one's Luna," he decided, gently touching the ear of the sleeping baby. "And her sister is Arya." Their fingers brushed as they both reached to adjust the blanket, and that same electric sensation rippled through him. This time, Kyria didn't pull away. "Your touch is warm," she murmured. "Nylori men are cooler, like the ice we evolved from." "Human men run hot," Chris replied, his voice dropping lower, "especially around beautiful women." Her lips curved in that subtle smile he was coming to treasure. "Is that a human mating ritual? Comparing body temperatures?" Chris laughed softly. "No, but maybe it should be." Their eyes locked, and the air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken desire. Kyria's hand moved to his chest, just as it had the night before, but this time with more deliberate intent. "Your heart races again," she whispered. "Can't help it," Chris admitted. "You have that effect on me." "Among my people, spiritual advisors are forbidden physical intimacy. It is believed to cloud our connection to the ancient wisdom." "And now," Chris asked, his hand cautiously moving to touch her silver hair. "Now I am cast out. The old rules no longer bind me." Her voice held both sadness and liberation. The moment might have progressed further, but a sudden noise from outside the cave froze them both. Chris was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the blaster at his hip. "Stay here," he whispered, moving cautiously toward the partially blocked entrance. Peering through a gap in the snowdrift, he saw what had caused the disturbance. A Nylori hunting party, 6 strong, making their way through the snow toward the cave. Their distinctive blue-white armor and ice spears marked them as warriors from the northern clans. Chris ducked back inside. "Trouble," he said quietly. "Nylori hunters headed this way." Fear flashed across Kyria's face. "They must be seeking shelter from the storm." "If they find me with the twins." She didn't need to finish the thought. "Is there anywhere to hide in here?" Chris asked, scanning the cave. "No need," Kyria said, her expression changing to one of determination. "I know these mountains better than any hunter." "There is another way," she pointed to the back of the cave. This cavern connects to an ancient network beneath the mountains. The entrances are hidden, known only to spiritual advisors. "You're still recovering," Chris protested. "And the babies. We'll die if we stay," she finished firmly. "I know of a sacred place within the network, a thermal spring with healing properties. It is perhaps a day's journey through the tunnels." The sounds of approaching voices grew louder. "We need to decide now," Kyria urged, already gathering the twins. Chris nodded, quickly packing essential supplies. "Lead the way." As Kyria moved toward the back of the cave, she hesitated, turning back to him. Without warning, she pressed her lips to his in a brief, intense kiss. "For luck," she whispered against his mouth. "A human custom, yes?" Before Chris could respond, she was moving again, revealing a narrow fissure in the rock wall that he would have missed entirely without her guidance. As they slipped into the hidden passage, Chris heard the hunting party enter the main cave. Their guttural language echoed behind them as Kyria led him deeper into the mountain's heart, away from danger and toward an uncertain future. Together, the tunnel narrowed until Chris had to hunch his broad shoulders to pass through. His portable light cast eerie shadows across ancient stone walls etched with symbols he couldn't decipher. Ahead, Kyria moved with surprising confidence for someone who had been near death just days before, the twins secured against her chest in a makeshift sling fashioned from his spare thermal shirt. "These markings," Chris whispered, running his fingers along a particularly intricate pattern. "What do they mean?" "They tell the history of my people," Kyria replied, her voice echoing softly. "Before we built cities of ice, we dwelled in these caverns, sheltered from the eternal storms above." The passage suddenly widened into a small chamber with several branching tunnels. Kyria paused, studying the paths with a frown. "It has been many cycles since I walked these ways," she admitted. "The correct path should be marked with the symbol of flowing water." Chris swept his light across the tunnel entrances, revealing various carved symbols. "This one?" he asked, illuminating a wavy line that resembled rippling water. Kyria nodded. "Your eyes are sharp for a human." "All the better to admire you with," he replied with a roguish grin. Her lips curved in that subtle smile he was coming to crave. "Is that another human mating ritual? Complimenting a female's appearance?" "It's called flirting, and yes, it's definitely part of our mating rituals." They continued through the chosen tunnel, the path gradually sloping downward. The air grew warmer, a welcome change from the bitter cold above. Small, luminescent fungi began to appear on the walls, casting a soft blue glow that reminded Chris of Kyria's skin. "The fungi are a good sign," Kyria said. "They grow stronger near the thermal springs." As they rounded a bend, a distant rumble shook the tunnel. Dust and small stones rained down from above. "What the hell was that?" Chris tensed, instinctively moving closer to Kyria and the twins. "The mountain shifts constantly," she explained. "These tunnels are ancient, and not all remain stable." No sooner had she spoken than a louder crack echoed through the passage. The floor beneath Chris's feet suddenly gave way, sending him plummeting into darkness. He heard Kyria's alarm cry as he fell, landing hard on a lower level with a grunt of pain. "Chris!" Her voice came from above, tinged with fear. "I'm okay," he called back, wincing as he tested his limbs. Nothing broken, but his left ankle throbbed painfully. "Stay there. I'll find a way back up." His light had survived the fall, revealing he'd dropped into another tunnel about 12 feet below. Looking up, he could see Kyria's concerned face peering down through the jagged hole. "There should be a connecting passage ahead," she called. "Follow your tunnel forward, and it should curve upward to rejoin this level." "Got it. Don't move. I'll come to you." Chris limped forward, gritting his teeth against the pain in his ankle. The tunnel was older here, the walls rougher and unmarked. After about 50 meters, he heard something that made him freeze, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind him. Extinguishing his light, Chris pressed himself against the wall, drawing his blaster. In the darkness, he could just make out a faint glow approaching, the distinctive blue-white illumination of a Nylori hunter's staff. One of them had found their trail and followed them into the tunnels. Chris weighed his options. He could try to ambush the hunter, but a firefight in these unstable tunnels could trigger a cave-in. Instead, he holstered his weapon and continued forward as quietly as possible, hoping to find that connecting passage before the hunter caught up. The tunnel began to slope upward, just as Kyria had predicted. Chris increased his pace despite his throbbing ankle, driven by the need to reach Kyria and the twins before the hunter did. Finally, the passage opened into a small chamber with several exits, including one that seemed to lead back to the upper level. As Chris started toward it, a voice spoke from behind him. "Human." The word was cold, filled with contempt. Chris turned slowly to face the Nylori hunter, who had emerged from the tunnel. Taller than Kyria and heavily muscled, the male's pale blue skin was marked with ritual scars, and his silver hair was pulled back in tight braids. He held an ice spear that glowed with an unnatural light. "The female and her abominations? Where are they?" the hunter demanded in accented standard. "Don't know what you're talking about," Chris replied evenly, shifting to block the upward passage. The hunter's eyes narrowed. "Lying is beneath even your kind. The outcast Kyria of House Volan must face justice for her impurity." "The only impurity I see is abandoning a mother and her newborns to die," Chris shot back. "Where I come from, we call that murder." "Where you come from is irrelevant," the hunter snarled, leveling his spear. "This is Nylori territory, governed by Nylori law." Before the hunter could advance, a section of the ceiling suddenly collapsed between them. Chris stumbled backward as rocks and debris crashed down, barely avoiding being crushed. When the dust cleared, the passage was completely blocked. "Chris," Kyria's voice came from above, "the tunnels are becoming unstable. We must hurry." Looking up, Chris saw she had found a way down to the chamber through another passage. She stood on a ledge about 8 feet above him, the twin still secure against her chest. "There's a hunter behind that rockfall," Chris warned, climbing up to join her, "and probably more following." Kyria's expression hardened with determination. "Then we must reach the springs before they find another way through. The sacred waters will give us strength and protection." As they continued deeper into the mountain's heart, Chris felt Kyria's hand slip into his. The simple contact sent warmth coursing through him that had nothing to do with the gradually rising temperature of the tunnels. "When we reach the springs," she said softly, "there is much I wish to share with you, Chris Wade." The look in her eyes left little doubt about her meaning, and Chris felt his heart rate quicken in response. Despite the danger pursuing them, or perhaps because of it, the connection between them was intensifying with each passing hour. "I'm looking forward to it," he replied, squeezing her hand gently as they ventured further into the ancient depths. The tunnel widened gradually, the rough stone walls giving way to polished surfaces etched with increasingly elaborate symbols. The air grew noticeably warmer and carried a mineral scent that reminded Chris of the hot springs back on Earth. Small rivulets of water trickled along channels carved into the floor, all flowing in the same direction. "We're close," Kyria whispered, her pace quickening despite her exhaustion. The twins stirred against her chest, making soft cooing sounds as if they too sensed their destination approaching. Chris limped alongside her, his injured ankle throbbing with each step. "Not a moment too soon," he muttered, glancing back at the tunnel behind them. "Those hunters won't be stopped by a cave-in for long." They rounded a final bend, and Chris halted in awe. Before them stretched a vast underground cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness high above. At its center lay a pool of water that glowed with an ethereal blue-green light, illuminating the entire space. Steam rose from the surface in lazy spirals, creating a misty halo around the pool. The walls surrounding it were carved with intricate murals depicting what appeared to be the history of the Nylori people. "The wellspring of renewal," Kyria breathed, her eyes shining with reverence. "Few outsiders have ever gazed upon it." "It's incredible," Chris admitted, momentarily forgetting their pursuers. The beauty of the place was undeniable, but more than that, he felt an inexplicable sense of peace washing over him. Kyria led him to the edge of the pool, where she carefully set the twins down on a flat stone altar. The babies remained surprisingly calm, their luminous eyes wide as they took in the glowing waters. "The ritual requires immersion," Kyria explained, her fingers working at the fastenings of her thin dress. "The waters will heal our bodies and strengthen our spirits." Chris watched, transfixed, as she slipped out of her garment. In the ethereal light, her blue skin seemed to shimmer with an inner radiance. She was more beautiful than any woman, human or alien, he had ever seen. "You should join me," she said, noticing his gaze. "Your ankle needs healing, and the waters will restore your strength." Chris hesitated only briefly before removing his armor and underclothes. The warm, humid air felt pleasant against his skin after days in the freezing cold. Kiria's eyes widened slightly as she took in his muscular form. "Human males are impressively built," she observed with that subtle smile that made his heart race. "All the better to rescue damsels in distress," he quipped, feeling a flush of heat that had nothing to do with the steamy cavern. They entered the pool together, the glowing water enveloping them in warmth. Chris gasped as an electric tingle spread through his body, centering on his injured ankle. The pain vanished almost instantly. "The waters contain rare minerals with regenerative properties," Kiria explained, moving closer to him. "But they do more than heal physical wounds. They open the mind to deeper connections." As if to demonstrate, she placed her palms against his chest. The sensation that followed was unlike anything Chris had experienced, a rush of emotions and impressions that weren't his own. He could feel Kiria's gratitude, her fear for her daughters, and something deeper, more intense, directed at him. "What was that?" he asked, breathless. "A glimpse of my essence," she replied. "The waters allow such sharing between compatible spirits." "Compatible, huh?" Chris smiled, his hands finding her waist beneath the glowing water. "I like the sound of that." Their bodies drew closer, the water seeming to push them together as if the very elements approved of their union. When their lips met, Chris felt that same rush of shared sensation, but stronger now, a feedback loop of desire and connection that transcended physical touch. "This is not how Nylori usually mate," Kiria whispered against his mouth. "We are taught to approach union as a duty, not a pleasure." "That's a shame," Chris replied, trailing kisses along her jaw to the sensitive point of her ear. "Humans believe pleasure is very much the point." Her soft gasp told him she agreed with the human perspective on this particular matter. They lost themselves in each other, the sacred water swirling around them as their bodies entwined. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, minutes or hours passing in a blur of sensation and discovery. The differences between their species only enhanced the experience. Each new touch a revelation. In the aftermath, they floated together in the glowing pool, a peaceful silence enveloping them. Kiria's head rested on Chris's chest, her silver hair spreading out around them like a halo. "The ritual is complete," she murmured eventually. "The waters have accepted our union." Chris stroked her hair, marveling at its silky texture. "Is that what we just did? A ritual?" She lifted her head to meet his gaze. "Among my people, such a union in these waters creates a bond that cannot be broken. We are now joined in ways beyond the physical." The implications of her words sank in slowly. In human terms, they had just gotten married, or something even more profound. Before Chris could respond, a sharp cry echoed through the cavern. They turned to see the twins squirming on the altar, suddenly agitated. "They sense danger," Kiria said, immediately moving toward the edge of the pool. As if confirming her words, a distant rumble echoed through the tunnels leading to the chamber. Not the sound of shifting rock, but of voices. The hunters had found their trail. "How many exits are there?" Chris asked, quickly climbing out and reaching for his clothes. Just one other," Kiria replied, dressing with equal haste and gathering the twins. "Through that passage." She pointed to a narrow opening, partially hidden behind a stalagmite formation. They had barely gathered their supplies when the first hunter appeared at the tunnel entrance they had used earlier. His shout of discovery echoed through the chamber, followed by the sound of more footsteps. "Go," Chris urged, drawing his blaster. "I'll hold them off and follow you." Kiria hesitated, her eyes meeting his with newfound intensity. Our bond compels me to stay by your side." "Our bond compels me to keep you and the girls safe," he countered. "I'll be right behind you. I promise." With a reluctant nod, she hurried toward the hidden exit, the twins secure in her arms. Chris took position behind a rock formation, his blaster aimed at the main entrance. The first hunter stepped into the chamber, ice spear raised, and Chris fired. Chris fired 3 rapid shots, not aiming to kill, but to create chaos. The energy blast struck the cavern wall above the entrance, sending chunks of rock crashing down and forcing the hunters to retreat temporarily. "That won't hold them long," he muttered, backing toward the hidden exit where Korea waited. Once through the narrow opening, he found himself in a perfectly circular tunnel with walls of smooth, polished ice that glowed with a faint blue luminescence. The floor was similarly smooth, sloping gently downward. "What is this place?" he asked, marveling at the construction. "The frost veins," Kyria replied, adjusting the twins in her arms. "Ancient pathways created by my ancestors to travel beneath the eternal storms. Few remember they exist." She led him to what appeared to be a large disk of translucent material embedded in the floor. When they stepped onto it, the disk began to glow more intensely. "Hold me," Kyria instructed, pressing against his side. Chris wrapped his arm around her waist just as the disk suddenly lurched forward, accelerating rapidly along the icy tunnel. They were sliding at tremendous speed, the tunnel walls blurring around them as the disk followed the contours of the passage like a guided sled. "Holy shit," Chris exclaimed, tightening his grip on Korea. A little warning would have been nice. She laughed, a musical sound he hadn't heard from her before. "The expression on your face was worth the surprise." The disk carried them through a complex network of tunnels, occasionally branching onto different paths without slowing. Chris lost all sense of direction, but Korea seemed to know exactly where they were heading, occasionally whispering words in her native language that seemed to influence their course. "The frost veins connect all major Nylori settlements," she explained as they raced through the icy labyrinth. "But they also lead to places my people have forgotten or chosen to forget." "Like the healing springs?" She nodded. "The council restricts knowledge of such places to maintain their power. Only spiritual advisors like myself are taught the old ways." "And that's why twins are such a threat?" Chris asked. "Because they might share that restricted knowledge?" "Partly," Kyria replied, her expression growing serious. "But there's more. Our bond in the sacred waters did more than join us. It created protection for Arya and Luna." She shifted slightly, revealing the twins' faces. Chris gasped. The baby's skin, previously the same pale blue as their mother's, now had a subtle golden undertone that seemed to pulse with inner light. "The waters recognize them as special," Kyria continued. "In our oldest legends, twins born to a spiritual advisor are said to possess unique abilities, the power to bridge worlds and unite divided peoples. The Council fears such power because it threatens their control." "So they'd rather see innocent babies die than risk losing their grip on power," Chris said, his jaw tightening. "Typical politicians. Same across the galaxy." The disk began to slow as they approached what appeared to be a dead end. Just before impact, the wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a small chamber beyond. The disk glided to a gentle stop, its glow fading. "We should rest here briefly," Kyria suggested. "The frost veins have carried us far from the hunters, but we still have distance to cover." The chamber was clearly designed as a way station. Simple stone benches lined the walls. A small basin of fresh water bubbled from a natural spring in one corner. Chris helped Korea settle the twins, who had remarkably slept through their high-speed journey. "How much farther to the human settlement?" he asked, checking his remaining supplies. "Half a day's travel through the veins," she replied. "We'll emerge near the trading post of New Anchorage." Chris nodded. He knew the place, a frontier town where human miners and Nylori traders conducted business under an uneasy truce. It wasn't the most welcoming spot, but it had a human garrison that would provide protection. As Kyria fed the twins, Chris found himself watching with a sense of wonder. Just days ago, he'd been a solitary hauler with no ties beyond his next cargo run. Now he was bonded to this extraordinary woman and responsible for 2 tiny lives that the most powerful forces on the planet wanted eliminated. "Having second thoughts?" Kyria asked, noticing his pensive expression. "Not even for a second," he replied honestly. "I'm just amazed at how quickly life can change." She smiled, that subtle curve of lips that had first captivated him in the cave. "Humans adapt remarkably well to change. My people resist it at all costs. It's both our strength and our weakness." "And what about you?" Chris moved to sit beside her, gently touching one of the twins' cheeks. "You seem pretty adaptable for a Nylori." "Perhaps that's why I was chosen to bear these 2, she mused, The waters of life don't make mistakes. Chris leaned in to kiss her, still marveling at the electric connection between them, a tangible current that seemed to flow from her body to his and back again. Their bond had transformed something that might have been merely physical into something transcendent. "When we reach New Anchorage," he said when they finally parted, "I have friends who can help us get off planet if necessary." Kyria's eyes widened. "Leave Glacius Prime? I never considered." "The Council won't stop hunting you. Hunting us," Chris pointed out. "There are human colonies where we could build a life together. Places where the girls could grow up safely." She was quiet for a moment, contemplating this radical idea. "To leave one's homeworld is no small thing," she finally said. "But to protect my daughters, our daughters now, I would travel to the stars themselves." A distant rumble interrupted their conversation. Not the sound of pursuers, but something else. "The veins are shifting," Kyria explained, gathering the twins. "It happens periodically. We should continue before our path changes." As they prepared to depart, Chris felt a strange sensation, a tingling at the back of his neck that usually signaled danger. He'd learned to trust that instinct during his years on this harsh world. "Kyria," he said quietly, "are we the only ones who know about these tunnels?" Her hesitation told him everything. The High Hunter might know. He's trained in the old ways, though the Council denies such knowledge publicly. "Then we need to assume he's using them too," Chris concluded, "possibly cutting us off before we reach New Anchorage." They stepped back onto the disk, which immediately began to glow. As it accelerated into the tunnel network once more, Chris checked his blaster charge and remaining ammunition. If the High Hunter was indeed pursuing them through the frost veins, their race to safety had become even more desperate. But with Kyria pressed against his side, the twins secure in her arms, Chris felt a determination unlike anything he'd experienced before. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting what had suddenly, unexpectedly, become his family. The frost veins exit materialized ahead, a shimmering portal of translucent ice leading to the surface. As their transport disk slowed, Chris felt that familiar prickle at the back of his neck intensify. "Something's wrong," he whispered, drawing his blaster. "We should be cautious." Kyria nodded, her luminous eyes narrowing as she clutched the twins closer. "I sense it too. A presence waiting." The disk glided to a stop before the portal. Beyond it, Chris could make out swirling snow and the dim outline of what appeared to be the outskirts of New Anchorage. They had made it, but his instincts screamed danger. "Stay behind me," he instructed, stepping off the disk and approaching the exit cautiously. The portal dissolved at his touch, revealing a small ice cave opening onto a snow-covered slope. The lights of the human settlement twinkled in the valley below, tantalizingly close. But standing between them and safety was a tall figure, clad in elaborate ceremonial armor of blue-white metal and bone. The High Hunter. Unlike the other hunters, he wore no helmet, revealing a face marked with ritual scars that formed intricate patterns across his pale blue skin. His silver hair was elaborately braided and adorned with small crystals that caught the dim light. In his hands, he held a staff topped with a glowing orb that pulsed with power. "The outcast and the human," he said, his voice deep and resonant, "with the abominations that threaten our way of life." Chris raised his blaster. "Step aside. We've got no quarrel with you or your people if you just let us pass." The High Hunter's lips curved in a cold smile. "You speak of peace while pointing a weapon, human. Typical of your kind. See, contradictions wrapped in violence." "Says the guy hunting babies," Chris retorted. Behind him, Kyria stepped forward, her posture straight and proud despite the exhaustion of their journey. "Talamir, this path leads only to your dishonor. The ancient texts speak of twins as bringers of change, not destruction." "The texts have been interpreted by the Council and the High Hunter," Talamir replied, "and they have judged. You were once respected, Kyria of House Valen. Now you consort with humans and bear impure offspring." "There's nothing impure about them," Chris growled. "And if your precious council spent half as much time helping your people as they do enforcing outdated traditions, maybe Glacius Prime wouldn't be such a frozen hellhole." Talamir's eyes narrowed. "You know nothing of our ways, human." "I know enough," Chris replied. I know you left a mother and her newborns to die in the snow. Where I come from, we call that murder and cowardice." The High Hunter's composure cracked slightly, anger flashing across his features. "You dare?" "He dares because he is right," Kyria interrupted. "Look at them, Talamir." She stepped forward, displaying the twins with their now golden-tinged skin. They have been blessed by the waters of renewal. The ancient prophecy is fulfilled. Talamir's eyes widened at the sight of the infants. Impossible. The golden ones are mere legend. Yet here they are, Kyria pressed. Born of my body, protected by a human who showed more honor than all the Nylori Council combined. For a moment, doubt crossed the High Hunter's face. Then his expression hardened once more. Legends or not, the Council has spoken. Stand aside, Kyria. The human will die quickly, and you may yet be granted mercy. Not happening, Chris said, his finger tightening on the trigger. What happened next occurred so quickly that Chris barely had time to react. Talamir raised his staff, the orb flaring with blinding light. A bolt of energy shot toward them, but instead of striking Chris or Kyria, it seemed to hit an invisible barrier inches from the twins. The energy rebounded, sending Talamir staggering backward. The twins began to glow more intensely, their golden aura expanding to envelop Kyria and Chris in a protective sphere. "The bond," Kyria gasped. "The sacred waters, they're protecting us through the twins." Talamir recovered his balance, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. He charged forward, abandoning his energy weapon for a blade that materialized from his armor. Chris met him halfway, ducking under the first swing and driving his shoulder into the High Hunter's midsection. Despite his bulk and strength, Chris found himself evenly matched against the Nylori warrior's speed and technique. They grappled in the snow, trading blows as Kyria began chanting in her native tongue, the twins' glow intensifying with each word. Chris felt a surge of energy flow through him, enhancing his strength and reflexes. With a roar, he broke Talamir's guard and landed a solid punch that sent the High Hunter sprawling. Before the Nylori could recover, Chris had his blaster trained on him once more. "It's over," he panted. "Stay down." Talamir glared up at him, blood trickling from his mouth. "Kill me then, human. Prove what we have always known about your violent species." Chris shook his head. "That's not how humans do things, at least not this human." He kept his blaster aimed, but didn't fire. "We protect those who need protecting. We stand up for what's right. And right now, that means letting a mother and her children live in peace." "The Council will send others worsening," Talamir warned. "Let them come," Kyria said, moving to stand beside Chris. "Each time, they will face the same truth, that their fear has blinded them to the future our people need." She gestured toward New Anchorage below. Humans and Nylori, working together despite their differences, that is the path forward, not clinging to traditions born of isolation and fear. Something shifted in Talamir's expression. Not surrender, but perhaps the first seed of doubt. "The Golden Ones are said to bridge worlds," he murmured, almost to himself. "They already have," Chris replied, lowering his weapon slightly. "They've bridged mine and Kyria's. Maybe that's just the beginning." A distant rumble drew their attention. From New Anchorage, a convoy of vehicles was ascending the slope. Human vehicles with the distinctive markings of the garrison. "Looks like the cavalry's arrived," Chris said with a grin. "Someone must have spotted us." Talamir rose slowly to his feet, his posture rigid with pride despite his defeat. "This is not ended, human." "No," Chris agreed, "but it's changing. You can be part of that change or get left behind in the snow. Your choice." For a long moment, the High Hunter stood motionless, his gaze moving from Chris to Kyria to the glowing twins. Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the swirling snow. As the human vehicles approached, Kyria leaned against Chris, her exhaustion finally showing. "Do you think he will return?" "Probably," Chris admitted. "But next time, we'll be ready, and we won't be alone." He looked down at the twins, their golden glow subsiding but still visible beneath their skin. Whatever power they possessed, whatever future they represented, he would be there to see it unfold. The lead vehicle pulled up beside them, and a familiar face grinned from the driver's seat. Hank Cooper, Chris's old trading partner. "Wade, you magnificent bastard," Hank called out. "Half the settlement's been betting you were dead." "And who's this lovely—" He stopped short, noticing Kyria and the twins. "Well, hell, looks like you've been busy." Chris laughed, the tension of the past days finally breaking. "You have no idea, Coop. Got room for a family of 4? Hank's eyebrows shot up, but his grin only widened. "For you? Always. Hop in. The missus is cooking up a storm, and these little ones look like they could use a proper welcome to New Anchorage." As they climbed into the vehicle, Kyria whispered, "Family of 4? Chris pulled her close, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. "If you'll have me." Her answer was in her eyes, luminous and filled with a future neither of them could have imagined days ago when he'd found her abandoned in the snow. 6 months later, Chris stood on the porch of their new home on the outskirts of New Anchorage, watching the twin suns set over the mountains. Behind him, he could hear Kyria singing softly to Aria and Luna, now thriving infants whose golden skin had become a source of fascination and hope throughout the settlement. Word had spread about the golden twins, and gradually attitudes were changing. Some Nylori had even broken with the council, seeking out the human settlement where the twins were said to be growing stronger each day. Kyria joined him on the porch, slipping her arms around his waist. "The girls are finally asleep," she murmured against his shoulder. "Both at once." "That's a minor miracle," he chuckled, turning to embrace her properly. Their bond had only deepened with time, the connection forged in the sacred waters growing stronger as they built their life together. What had begun as an act of basic human decency, rescuing a mother and her newborns from certain death, had transformed into something neither could have anticipated. "Any sign of trouble?" Kyria asked, scanning the horizon out of habit. "Not today," Chris replied, "and if it comes tomorrow, we'll face it together." As the last light faded from the sky, he thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a chance encounter in the snow to a family forged through danger and devotion. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever prophecies the twins might fulfill, one thing was certain. No one would ever again abandon Kyria or her daughters in the snow. Not while he had breath in his body, not while humanity stood ready to protect what was right.